and welcome back to Ag on the Edge. I'm your host, Louise Lampera, and joining me today is Eryn Wingate. Eryn is an agronomist, one of a growing number of scientists that are changing the agricultural industry, bringing a knowledge of biology, botany, chemistry, genetics, and more into agricultural operations and practices. We're so excited for today's conversation. Welcome, Eryn. So good to have you here.
Hi, Louise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're an agronomist,
Yes.
right? And what exactly is that?
An agronomist is a pretty general term, and it can mean anybody who works in agriculture and is either growing food or helping to grow food by bringing knowledge of soil science, water quality, nutrient management, and pest control into the equation so that we are farming in a science-based way. And of course, farming isn't just a science, it's an art as well. And you need experience and be in the field and get to know what everything looks like on a daily basis. So it's not hard science, but the agronomist role is trying to bring a little bit more knowledge into it so that we can do a better job.
So expanding technologies, like you said, bringing in knowledge of hydrology,
Yes.
soils, what do plants need and when?
Yes.
All right. But I have heard that you kind of had a different pathway
Yeah.
to getting involved in farming. Unlike some of our previous guests, you're not a fourth, fifth, or sixth generation, family farmer.
Not at all.
But that you actually had other plans. And could you tell us a little bit about your journey to getting to farming?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm from Los Angeles, and I grew up in a family that loves the arts, and I have musicians in my family and people that have been in musical theater, and so we were always encouraged to be in musicals and sing and play music, and I gravitated towards dance, especially ballet and contemporary dance. So that is what my focus was growing up all through high school. And then finally, when I got to the end of high school, I wasn't quite there yet, ready and good enough to be a professional dancer. And not only that, but the lifestyle is so difficult, and it's very, very hard to make money as a professional dancer. And during that time growing up, I also really loved science. And my dad is a civil engineer, and I loved standing in the kitchen with him, helping cook, and we would talk about all kinds of science topics. So he told me I needed to go to college and and switch gears. And so I did. I went to community college after high school first to just explore my options and see what else I might like to do in the world besides ballet. And I ended up doing environmental science, and I transferred to UC Davis. And pretty much as soon as I got there, I got an internship in a soil science lab. And I fell in love with that mix of sciences all in one. And there's so much opportunity for application. The soil science is chemistry and biology and hydrology all wrapped up into one. And so I was able to choose an emphasis in environmental science. My emphasis was soil and biogeochemistry. And so I got to learn about microbiology and so many fascinating things about that life that's going on underground and helping to cycle nutrients and keep our planet alive. So shortly before graduation, I heard about this job opportunity in Ventura County at TriTech Ag Products, where I could bring my soil science and soil microbiology information into the field and help growers to use that knowledge to hopefully improve their results and apply fertilizer in an environmentally friendly way. So it was a long journey, and I may miss ballet still, but but I'm very glad I'm here. It's a fascinating field to be in, and exciting every day.
I think
Yeah.
not. What's fascinating to me is that, you know, hearing how you entered into farming again without having, you know, like a family farm that had been passed down for generations, but yet what you do, it directly contributes to and supports the production of food here in Ventura County.
Yeah.
And I want to unpack a little bit of you know the some of the terms that you used and the parts of science, you know, that can you explain a little bit about why knowing soil and soil health issues are so important to farming?
Sure. Well, plants need an environment to grow in that that's optimum for them. So the plants are taking up the majority of their nutrients from the soil. We as humans are eating our foods, our breads and protein sources, and that's giving us the essential nutrients that we need, like nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. And we take in those nutrients, and they're building blocks for us to grow our bodies and provide our energy throughout the day. Plants are getting their energy from photosynthesis, from the sun, but all of the other nutrient building blocks that they need to grow their structure, they're absorbing those from the soil. So all of their macronutrients, we call them, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, those are all being absorbed through their roots in the soil. And the roots need a happy place where they can grow and expand freely. They also need oxygen to survive, and they need the right amount of soil moisture because those nutrients are absorbed with the water that they're taking in through the roots. And so having a happy soil environment is really key to the crop's health. And there's a lot to learn about it. Ventura County has many different soil types, and some have a lot of clay, and they're sticky and heavy. They might form clumps easily or become compacted. Other soils are very sandy. And if you think about beach sand and pour water over that, the water will drain very quickly, dry out. And then there's the Goldilocks soil type, the loams that are kind of fluffier, and they have lots of organic matter. It's providing plenty of nutrients that are stored there, but then also pore space for those roots to get the air that they need as well. So I'm bringing in some of this soil science knowledge so that I can make recommendations to improve that soil quality or soil health, as people have probably heard that buzzword. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to do, is improve the soil quality or protect it. Yeah.
So can you describe a little bit, you know, like how do farmers approach you? How does this all work? How does the knowledge for how we give plants what they need and want get from your head out to, say, the Oxnard strawberry fields?
Sure. Well, I work for Tritech Ag Products. We're a full-service retail and application company, so we sell fertilizers and amendments and pest control materials. And so I'll work with customers and, say, a strawberry grower. We form a working relationship, and everybody kind of needs different levels of involvement from me, but one typical arrangement is they want suggestions or recommendations for fertilizer or for soil amendments. So the first thing I do is go out and get a soil sample, or have my coworker go and get a soil sample and a water sample, and we send those to a local laboratory. And then I look at the results, and I can see what is the soil pH, what's the soil salinity, what are the concentrations of the different nutrients. And then I can go out and look at the field and assess it by touch and feel, and how does it look, and ask the grower what their experiences have been. Are there any areas of the field where there are issues? And then I take a look at what crop they're growing, and there's lots of information available on crop-specific nutrient requirements. So then I come up with a plan to address any issues that there are in the soil, and I can come up with a list of fertilizers and application rates and timings to provide what that crop needs when it needs it. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible.
Okay, because I think, there's a general perception out in the public that a farmer would just place an order, say, for whatever generic fertilizer there may be, right? Similar to walking down the aisle at one of the big box stores and, loading up your cart with generic fertilizer, and then just go out and apply it, on a Tuesday, because Tuesday was the day that he was free. Right. Or she was free. Yeah. But what you're saying actually is that it's very different, that it's very calculated.
Yes.
And soil dependent, yes. Which it would also be, I think, field dependent, right? And crop dependent.
Absolutely.
And so how can we best describe, so that the general public understands that everything is based on timing, everything is
yes.
based on.
Well, you're talking about going into the store and just loading up fertilizer, and I'm imagining maybe my grandmother or other family members that like to garden and go to Home Depot and you buy the Miracle Grow, right?
Exactly.
And you just give it a few spoonfuls. It's not like that at all. It's much more prescriptive in commercial agriculture. It's a lot more like if you want to be a fitness competitor, you are weighing out every meal. You need your 4 ounces of protein and your 100 grams of brown rice and a half a cup of broccoli. Mm-hmm. That's the situation we're dealing with in the field. So I know that I want to apply, say, 200 pounds of nitrogen to the strawberries, and I know that during the first 6 weeks to 2 months, those plants are not going to be taking up very much nitrogen, and then nitrogen uptake will increase in a linear fashion. And then when the strawberries are in their peak growing period, peak production, they're taking up 1 pound of nitrogen per acre per day. And then I need to factor in how efficient is that nitrogen uptake. And so I'm making very careful calculations so that I'm applying exactly the right amount of N per acre per week. And that's a very iterative process. We are out there in the fields all the time looking at the plants. We can even test the soil for nitrate levels in season, doing what we call a nitrate quick test, using a test strip. And so we can take a look at how concentrated the nitrogen is in the soil and whether that's enough to support growth, or whether we might have a little bit too much at that time, and then we can reduce our nitrogen applications for the next couple of weeks. So we're being as careful as we can, and the nutrients are an investment, right? Customers, our growers, they don't want to spend money on fertilizer they don't need. And they are also very aware of protecting the soil. It's not going to help the plants to over apply the nutrients. And so everything is calculated for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there are some that are less calculated than others. And then once you understand the crop and know your soil type, you can get into a pattern with it, and you know what that needs. Just like if you're on a diet and you know what 4 ounces of chicken look like, you don't have to weigh it every single day. But there's a lot of knowledge out there that's crop specific and soil type specific, so that people are doing a better and better job at just applying what's needed rather than throwing on all the Miracle Grow.
Yeah. Much more highly and tightly controlled.
Yeah.
Than I think what most people realize.
Yeah.
And and some of that, I'm sure, goes to the economics, like you were saying, of ag operations, where these fertilizers cost money. So how do we apply them at the best time in the right rates and maximize the return? But it also, I think, speaks highly of, farming's history and belief in taking care of the land, but now with using science to help us get there.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, which is all much different than, I'm sure a lot of people remember a statement that was made at one or two elections ago in a debate where all farming is you dig a hole, you put in a seed, you apply some water, and up comes a plant. And that's not at all what I'm hearing you say.
No, it's not, and that's a sad perception of it. And anybody who's grown a garden at home knows that it's more difficult than that, even if they're applying just spoonfuls of Miracle Grow. But yeah, anybody who's had a garden knows that one day the plants can be looking great, and the next morning they wake up and they're covered in powdery mildew, right?
Yes.
Or aphids. Or you look out there and everything's all yellow, or you've got brown leaf tips. So it is not easy. We are out there dealing with a million factors a day. There's the weather, and things can go so wrong so quickly because we get a flood or a wind event like we've had these past couple weeks, or a drought, a heat wave. All of those things make this incredibly challenging. And then there's soil variation and needing to address very specific requirements. Like we can go out there and see that the leaves are chlorotic. Like they've got yellow veins,
Okay.
or they're mottled in some way, and so we look for specific micronutrient deficiencies, right? The yield or the quality of crop could be limited simply because the plant is deficient in zinc or iron. So we're getting very specific with it, trying to figure that out. The strawberries and bell peppers are leaf sampled every 2 or 3 weeks. And we look at the concentration of nutrients in those leaves to make sure that we've got the right amount of all of those macro and micronutrients. And then we apply what we need more of, or cut back a little bit if something is excessive. So it's very careful and monitored.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Well, one of the things that I also hear people, comment on a lot is, Ventura County has some of the best agricultural soil on the planet. And I was under the mistaken impression that oh, that's all just natural, and there's nothing that we need to do. But is that statement far off from the truth? And is what you're doing enhancing the natural soil fertility here, or are you keeping it, staying as what? Where does the history and that saying that we have,
Yeah.
about Ventura County soil come into play with the science?
A bit of both, a bit of both. We are very lucky in this county to have naturally good soil, and there are lots of different soil types too. And we've got these alluvial floodplains, so we've got a lot of topsoil that's been laid down by rivers bringing sediments in onto a floodplain, and over millennia or thousands of years, that's built up a pretty deep layer of topsoil that is farmable. And it depends on where you go in the county, and I'm not a geology expert, so I don't know the history of all of our different soil types and the depth of topsoil and all of the different watersheds in the area. But we do have very good soil naturally in most places, and what we need to do is continue to protect it. And I think that our biggest issue with soils here that I need to come in and help with is soil salinity. And some of that would occur naturally because we're in a Mediterranean climate, and when we've been through a long drought and there hasn't been a lot of rain, those salts haven't gotten the opportunity to wash down the soil profile. So we're naturally going to get some salinity building up. But it is worsened by agriculture. We're applying fertilizers all the time, and so we'll have more salinity buildup than would probably occur in a natural setting. And soil is damaged. Damaged may be too strong a word, perhaps, but we're tilling all the time, and that's disturbing soil microbial communities and disturbing the soil's natural structure, and so that can degrade the quality of the soil and its ability to support plants over the long term. The soil needs to retain a structure so that there are what we call soil aggregates, which are kind of clumps of the soil mineral material with pore space in between. Like I talked about earlier, those roots need oxygen to survive, and the pore space is where the water flows through. So we want even water distribution, and we want to leave room for air. And so tillage disturbs that, and over time can lead to compaction and other issues. And so we need to think about how we can alleviate some of that pressure and alleviate some of the soil salinity that it's naturally going to build up. But we're very lucky here that the soil types that are here are very high in nutrients and calcium. Since we're in this Mediterranean climate, soil weathering occurs more slowly than in, say, a tropical area. If you go to tropical locations, the soils are going to be older and leached and weathered. They're not going to hold as many nutrients necessarily. Maybe that gets a little bit too technical, but we've got soil types that have a good capacity to hold nutrients, and they're already pretty rich in calcium and potassium, what we call the cations, magnesium, and mostly we've got plenty of phosphorus as well, although that can be not as available to plants because of the higher pH of our soils. But in general, we have a great starting point, and then we just need to make sure that we're protecting it and supplying the nitrogen that plants are using so much of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that there are farmers here in the county, across the nation, but focusing on Ventura County, which you were talking about, the tilling and how do we preserve, our soil health,
Yeah.
so to speak. And that makes me think of, some of the recent focus around regenerative agricultural practices. And is that something that agronomists are also studying and trying to find that, how do we use some of those practices but bring the science of, because I would imagine, cover cropping, the little I know of regenerative agriculture, right? There's some cover cropping, there's no-till, there's mulching. But how do you get those to take care of soil health at the same level of precision of what you were describing?
Yes. Well, there's a lot to unpack
Yeah.
there. Well, first off, yes, regenerative agriculture that has become quite a buzzword,
Yes.
right? And it means different things to different people, but it means that the agriculture that you're doing, the practices that you're using, should be building up soil. That's what regenerative means.
Okay.
Those practices are supposed to lead to regenerating the soil, and so in order to do that, the major thing, kind of the turnkey, is building soil organic matter and sequestering carbon in the ground. So the goal is to grow a microbial community, and those microbes are storing carbon and other nutrients in their bodies, and as one population dies off, they are decomposed by the incoming generations.
Okay.
And as that decomposition occurs, some of that carbon will be released back into the atmosphere as CO2 due to their respiration. But some of it will stay in the soil. That's what sequestered is. It will become part of this longer term organic matter, and we call it fixed. And in our climate here, fixing that soil carbon is difficult because we don't have as much rain, and we're more likely to lose more of the carbon to the decomposition, and it'll blow off as CO2. And we don't have a long enough period of time when our soils are cold and wet to get the same carbon fixation that you would see in the Midwest. And also that carbon fixation takes time where the soil is not disturbed by tillage. And that's difficult here as well, because part of what's great about agriculture in Ventura County is that the weather is great all the time, and one field can turn out 3 or 4 crops in a year.
Right.
And so in these cases, no-till is not an option. There may be people who might want to try minimum tillage at some point. I'm not sure, but when you're growing fresh vegetables, Field cleanliness and food safety is a huge concern, and you can't have partially decomposed organic material from the previous crop in there that could cause more pest damage and more mildew or possibly food safety issues. And it's just a lot more difficult to do those soil health practices here in Ventura County than it is on a different cropping cycle in the Midwest.
Okay. I'm glad that you tied it into food safety regulations, because like our listeners, one of our previous episodes was Lisa Tate, who is a farmer in the Heritage Valley area, and she described some of her challenges with the food safety laws. And I think it's something that definitely had never even occurred to me, that no tillage, allowing for previous crops to decompose and rot, it may be violating those considerations.
I don't know specifically what the regulations are around that no-till, but that's not done in vegetable production here. I don't know how much that would have to do with food safety necessarily, but probably a lot more so in just keeping the crop alive. And when you do no-till, you need time for the residue from the previous crop to decompose to a certain extent and cycle those nutrients back into the soil. During the earlier stages and mid stages of decomposition, you're going to get this huge growth of the soil microbial community, and those guys are going to be consuming all of that nitrogen. You get what we call nitrogen immobilization, because it's being stored in their living bodies.
Oh, okay.
And then the populations might hit a peak and then start to decline. And as some of them die off, that nitrogen will be released back into soil solution and available for plant uptake. And some of the successful no-till systems in the Midwest, and they say that it takes about 10 years to go from a conventional system to a fully functioning, high-yielding no-till system, because the soil environment needs to change completely, and you've got to establish a very robust and diverse and very active soil microbial community, and you have to build up a higher percentage of organic matter so that you've got multiple populations growing and dying off at the same time, so that there's a steady release of nutrients rather than very sharp peaks and valleys.
Okay.
And so when we're growing vegetables here, and it's a
quick rotation.
Yes,
Yeah.
We've got 90 to 140 day crops, or some even shorter, like cilantro could be 30 or 40 days. You need exactly the right amount of nitrogen and other nutrients at the right time in this very short window. So some of the soil health practices make it very difficult to hit those requirements, and so that's why I think that you can't be too rigid in your belief system about agriculture. Like, regenerative practices have many benefits, but they may not be the right fit for some situations, and there could be ways to incorporate aspects of both to do the best job in the system that you have with the requirements that you have. So here, rather than doing no-till and trying to add carbon to the soil with that residue from the previous crop, maybe we are doing some tillage so that the residue can be worked evenly into the ground. But then in season, we can apply carbon from other sources to feed the microbial community. We've got liquid organic fertilizers that have a high carbon content, and they're a great food source for the microbes. So we add that into the fertilizer program along with conventional mineral nitrogen sources so that we can feed the microbes, but also make sure we're applying plant available nitrogen at the time that the crop needs it.
So again, always working towards that aim, of healthy soil.
Yes. Yeah.
For the conditions for the crops that are in the ground or will be in the ground in that particular location.
Right.
So, well, I wanna switch a little bit to another buzzword.
Okay.
Organic.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot, and now given my what I do, career wise, I hear from a lot of people, or I'm stopped by people who ask me the question of, well, why doesn't Ventura County just switch to all organic? Wouldn't that save the planet? And so I'm throwing that question to you. The science of it organic versus what we would term conventional farming.
Right.
What does it mean? And can we just switch?
Yeah, it's a hard topic, and I'm from LA, and most of my friends and family want to eat organic fruits and vegetables, and they've got a fear of pesticides, and I can understand that. But organic is not the end all be all savior, and it's very difficult to do. So in organic agriculture, the fertilizers and pest control materials used need to be derived from from natural sources.
So I'm going to interrupt real quick. So organic uses pest control.
Yes, organic fruits and vegetables, organic crops are also sprayed with pesticides. They're just organic approved pesticides, meaning they're made from naturally sourced materials. Nothing is synthetically derived.
Okay.
But that said, they are still pesticides, and they are still sprayed with the same equipment.
And they are still potentially dangerous, I'm guessing.
Yes, they could be. And that said, most of them are gentle and probably safe, but they aren't tested quite as much. And with the conventional pest control materials, there are very strict rules about how to use them. And those rules are enforced rigorously. So those materials have to be sprayed in a very specific quantity, and there are limits to how many applications can be made, and there are rules about, well, if you apply it on this day, how many days do you have to wait until the crop is harvested or until workers are working in the field. And there's lots of data and testing that's done to make sure that those materials are very safe for humans to consume. And many of those materials have broken down and are no longer present in the crops that we're eating. And so that rigorous testing, for me, it makes it feel safer sometimes even than organic. And organic is sprayed just as often, maybe sometimes if not more often, because those pest control materials, they don't always work as well. And so I think that people's fear of pesticides is understandable given what they see in the media. But I think that they can have more faith in what we're doing, and trust in our DPR in California is the best anywhere, right?
DPR being the Department of Pesticide Regulation.
Right,
here at the state. Yeah.
they are really regulating us so much. So I think that we can trust that we are growing foods incredibly safely here. We're probably growing the safest foods in the world, and the organic practices. If you went out to a field today, you probably wouldn't be able to tell by looking at the fields which ones are organic and which ones are conventional. They're all tilled the same. They're sprayed. They're just sprayed with different materials. And the organic materials, like I said, they don't usually work as well as the conventional materials. And so those organic crops require a lot more resources in order to produce the same amount of food. And the same goes with the fertilizer. While those organic fertilizers are providing really good things for the soil, they're adding carbon and amino acids, and they're giving food for microbes and food for the plant. And I think that part of it is fantastic, but it makes it so that not all of those nutrients are necessarily going to be in a plant available form when the plants need it. As if you apply a fertilizer that's made from an organic source, like we've got pea protein hydrolysates, right? And we've got fish emulsions and other materials that are made from animal or plant sources. That's still in these carbon compound forms. So the microbes need to take that material and decompose it to release the nitrogen that's in there. So we call that nitrogen mineralization. And once the microbes have done their bit of decomposition work, then the plants can absorb that nitrogen. But the amount and timing of that nitrogen released is dependent on the soil microbial activity, their population dynamics, and that's very difficult to predict.
Isn't that dependent a bit on like temperature, weather,
Yes.
humidity, things like that?
Yeah, it's dependent on soil temperature and soil moisture. It's also affected by the soil's texture, all kinds of things. So it's hard to match up plant demand with nitrogen availability or other nutrient availability.
Yeah, you wouldn't, it sounds like necessarily, or there would have to be some additional calculation and additional maybe buffer.
Yes.
Rather than going out and testing a leaf for what appears to be the mineral deficiencies, like what you were describing, in a plant, you could not then immediately address that plant's deficiencies and needs.
Yeah, so we need to apply more in organic agriculture. We often do need to apply more fertilizer and more pest control because it just isn't working as efficiently. And so it's very resource intensive, and it takes more land and fertilizer, pesticide, sometimes water, than it does for conventional to produce the same amount of food. And so in some ways, conventional can be more sustainable than organic, because in organic, you may be doing all these great things for the soil by adding carbon-based fertilizer sources, but then if you've used all of those resources but you can't produce the crop, then that's hurting everybody. And you are still tilling in that system. And in a conventional system, you can apply some of those carbon-based amendments still. But you're still allowed to use the mineral nitrogen fertilizer. So I wish I could see a system that had a heavy emphasis on fertilizers to build up soil quality. So kind of like if you were to start with an organic system, but then I'd like to be allowed to use a little bit of mineral fertilizer when I need it.
To fill in for the deficiencies as they happen.
Yes.
You know, it was drier than what we anticipated, or maybe wetter. I'm not sure how soil microbes work, but so that we didn't get the breakdown from the big compound fertilizer to the available nitrogen. So we need to tweak it.
Right.
At that moment.
Yeah, so let's say the soil temperature is really cold and the organic fertilizer isn't mineralizing into the plant available form. Well, then let's apply a little bit of mineral and to meet that need. But in organic, you're not allowed to do that. Everything has to be in the organic source, so it doesn't leave that flexibility, and that makes it very difficult to achieve the yields, to keep growers in business, and to be efficient with our land and resources. So that's why I think that the conventional can be much more sustainable, because you're more guaranteed to. You're never guaranteed, but
right. as these recent wind events have shown us.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But it's more possible to be consistent with the yield and quality when we've got materials allowed that are effective and specific to the requirements.
Okay. You mentioned too more water. Why would that be? Why? How does organic sometimes require more water?
Well, perhaps I misspoke a bit, but in order to produce the same volume, you need more land.
Okay.
Because you're producing less per acre in organic.
Okay.
Usually.
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of that less production is because of not being able to so finely tune exactly what the plants need, when they need it, and also to hopefully very finely tune what help they need from pests and other threats.
Right.
Okay.
You know, if you think about when you take yourself to the doctor, if you're feeling sick, and you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, you've got strep throat, let's give you an antibiotic. And that antibiotic is specific to the issue that you're dealing with, and you kill that off and feel better, and it's great. With organic agriculture, you can't get as specific, and the materials aren't quite as effective, and so you'll have more pest pressure and more likely to run into nutrient deficiency than you would in conventional a lot of the time. And this is a big generalization. Mm-hmm. There are lots of very successful organic operations, but I think more to the point is that the conventional setting, I don't think should be as demonized as it often is, because growers who are not necessarily labeled organic are still doing things to improve soil health. I help out with several orchards that are not organic, but they apply mulch or compost a couple times a year, if not more often, mm-hmm. and they apply beneficial fungi and bacteria. And in the strawberry fields that I work with that are conventional, they're applying liquid organic fertilizer along with the conventional materials. And and they're applying just the right amount of fertilizer, and they're not over applying, and they're not leaching excess nitrate because they are so careful. And there are other soil health and land stewardship practices that people do as well, like planting buffer strips and windbreaks to prevent erosion from happening.
Pollinator plants
Yes.
alongside fields.
Yeah. And in conventional strawberries, we apply predatory mites.
Wow.
Yeah, called persimulus, and they feed on the two-spotted spider mite that are eating our strawberry leaves. So we're applying all of the tools that we have in order to successfully grow this high-yielding crops. We need to grow as much high-quality food as we can on as little land and resources as we can. And every grower is trying to protect that land that they have and run a good business. And so they are incentivized to be great stewards.
One thing that I recently had a chance to see, and I had only read about it, or heard about it, is on a strawberry field, non-chemical pest control, where they had a vacuum.
The bug vac.
Yes, the bug vacuum, and
Yeah.
that just that was amazing to see the connection between emerging technology and farming.
Yeah, who would have thought you could vacuum
Yeah.
up the licus? But when I first started at TriTech, I saw that and it blew my mind. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's all kinds of new technology and all kinds of practices that there's no one size fits all. You got to do a little bit of everything to be successful.
And that's why scientists like you are being kept so busy, I think,
Thanks.
with what's going on with day to day, because Mother Nature will bring in surprising things,
Sure
out
will.
of left field, and
Yeah.
Well, this is a little outside of science, but I would love to get your thoughts, particularly being that you bring some outside eyes. I mean, you're very enmeshed in agriculture today, but with your background and your history and your life knowledge, right? Is that Ventura County, we have a $2 billion agricultural industry. Everywhere you go, you hear people saying how much they love agriculture. Our board of supervisors strongly supports the agricultural industry. We even have, some laws and regulations to protect agricultural lands here in the county. But yet, farmers continue to struggle with one, no economic growth whatsoever in this county, running into conflicts with within a lot of our agriculture is up against the urban boundary, and fighting for sufficient water for irrigation and the like. So how do we build more support, not just for our farmland, but for our actual farming operations here in the county? What do you wish, it could be a message taken out to the world to build support for our farmers?
I think that people should be more curious about farming and come and learn about it. We're an urban farming county, and so I think it would be better for everybody if the general public knew more about these specific farmers and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think that farming needs to be humanized a bit. Like doing podcasts like this, where you can see I'm a regular person. I want to protect the soil. I want it to be sustainable for hundreds of years to come, and so does everybody else in this industry. Nobody is here for selfish or greedy reasons. Farming is incredibly difficult, and you have to love it in order to
100%,
be in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're in a very difficult economic and regulatory environment, and water will continue to be an issue, and I think that we're going to need some infrastructure changes probably, and you may see differences over the next decades in the types of crops grown here, maybe. But this will continue being an issue for a long time. So I think that the general public should appreciate that the food that we are growing here and work with us to keep agriculture going for the benefit not just of our county but the country and the world. We're exporting the nation's health foods, right? We're growing salads and
fresh fruit,
and
avocados.
Avocados, yeah. Everybody loves their avocado toast, right?
Yep.
So we're proud of that. We want to keep doing it. We need to keep doing that. And so we need regulations that are working with us, and we need understanding on both sides so that the people that are living just a couple blocks away from the fields feel safe. And I think a lot of that starts with education. And I think we need to keep science education in schools a priority, because if you don't understand basic science of your chemistry and biology, then that builds more fear around what we're doing, because people don't understand it, and it's very hard to have the language to communicate it without this science background. And then for those adults, I think that we need to connect with each other on a more personal basis, and maybe give the public more opportunity to come out and see what we're doing and be reassured that we are doing everything we possibly can to keep them safe and the land safe.
And continue to build that soil health for the next 100, 200 years, like you're saying.
Right, yeah.
So it sounds like you have a lot of hope for the future of agriculture in Ventura County.
I hope to be here for a good while longer, yes.
Well, and so what would you say to, the younger person who is a little curious about farming but maybe doesn't want to be a farmer, but what would you say to them?
I would say come out and spend a few days in the field, or get an internship, and keep learning about science in school. And I tell them this industry keeps you on your toes, and it's never boring. You're not going to be stuck in an office necessarily. If you want to be a crop advisor, like I'm a certified crop advisor, so that means that I've been educated in soil science and plant science, and took an exam to get the certification. So I provide recommendations on fertilizer use and water quality, and so that means that every day there's a new challenge, and biology is very messy, as people say.
Yes, it is.
and so I get to be a little detective in the field, and it's interesting. It's incredibly rewarding, to see an issue or know that there's a likelihood that you might run into one, and then come up with a plan to help it and feed those plants, and then to see that my plan worked and the crops are healthy. That's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the feedback loop.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, all right. What's one thing that you think we are not talking about in regards to farming that we need to start talking about?
Oh, tough question. I think the organic issue is organic was first created to be environmentally friendly and preserve our soils and our land. But the tillage is the major factor driving soil organic matter loss and soil quality degradation, and organic alone doesn't solve that. And that's what people are starting to talk about, regenerative. But many of those regenerative practices aren't really applicable in this county. And I don't have the answers to that's very complicated to try and figure out how to preserve soil quality in a location where soil organic carbon is very difficult to fix long term. So this is a science-based question. And I think that people are approaching it from an ideological perspective that has turned into more of a religion, I would say, in some ways. And I think that people should talk more realistically about what works and what doesn't, and be more open to trying different things and being open to a combination of conventional practices and organic or regenerative. So I think that we should be more able to discuss organic's downfalls and be honest with ourselves and everybody else about what sustainability really looks like here. What is true sustainability?
Well, and it's through the difficult conversations, right? Sometimes the conversations that it seems like we really don't want to have, that we eventually find the solution.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, this podcast here today and everything you've shared and, will help get that conversation moving more into the mainstream, and with an eye towards how do we solve
I
the
think
problem.
so. Yeah, I sure hope so. And we're not in a terrible spot right now. We still do have great soil quality here, and people work hard every day to protect it. So we're not in crisis mode, but I do have a lot of hope for the future and seeing what we can all come up with as a community.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, Eryn, so much for your time and sharing your expertise and your knowledge and for having this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Louise. It's been really fun.
So,
Yeah, I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about all these hot button issues, and hopefully people are curious to learn more about it.
yeah, well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and hopefully the first of many taking us closer towards solutions.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for another conversation with Ag on the Edge. Help our podcast reach the widest audience possible. Give us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Like and subscribe, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel. And we'll see you with the next episode.